Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. We're going to be looking at DatChat today. You sent us all this info on the stock analysis, technical indicators, and a full company overview. We really want to make sure we break it all down so you know what it means for you.
We do have some sources on this. DatChat's recent price movements and volatility, and what kind of news is really driving these changes. Of course, we need to look at the company's financial health, and really importantly, where it sits in this whole secure messaging landscape.
Okay, well, you know what? Let's just start with the stock price. What's been going on with DatChat stock? It sounds like it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride.
It has been. The data actually shows quite a bit of volatility. For instance, back on March 24th of this year, the price fluctuated between $2.04 and $2.24.
Wow.
It even fell that day by 1.82%. It closed at $2.16 after opening at $2.20.
So it closed down, but then it went way up.
It did. By the 27th, the price was up to $3.51.
Okay, so that's a big jump.
Yeah, pretty big jump in a short time, huh?
Yeah. So even with that little dip, the recent trends look pretty strong.
Well, they are strong. Over the past week, it's gained over 67%. And if we look at the past month, we're looking at an over 51% increase. But even more than that, the last year shows an increase. One source says 144.68. The other one says 139.58. But somewhere in there, big increase. What do you think about that?
It's a big increase, definitely something that you'd notice. But, in the information you sent over, you mentioned something about the trading volume when the price was falling. Can you maybe unpack that a little bit and explain why, that's something that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, one of the things that really sticks out is you see higher volume when the price is falling. And what that means is, essentially, if people are selling their share, a lot of people are selling their shares when the price is going down, it could be a lack of confidence in the company. And, in that lack of confidence, what that could lead to is further decreases as more people sell.
So it's kind of like a snowball effect. One person sees another person selling, and then it just kind of, it just keeps going down. Makes sense.
But on the other hand, increased volume also means more interest in the stock.
Right.
So how can you tell which is which?
Yeah. How do you tell, if it's a good thing or a bad thing?
The real key is to just, figure out if that volume, is it associated with, are the prices rising or are they falling? And that can help you to try to understand the sentiment, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay, so moving on to the technical analysis, it doesn't sound like it's giving us a super clear signal as to, what we should do right now with DatChat.
It's definitely mixed signals, I would say. If we look at the moving averages are, those are things that we use to smooth out price fluctuations. They try to identify trends, to help us figure out if the price is going to go up or down. Some are saying to buy, some are saying to sell. So it's kind of, different things. Yeah, it's like different trends kind of pointing in different directions.
Okay, but the long-term, I noticed that the long-term moving average is above the short-term moving average. So how does that factor in, to what somebody should, consider when they're, looking at the stock?
Well, that's a general sell signal. If the long term is above the short term, that could mean that, even though there might be some like upward movement, overall, the longer-term trend might still be downward.
Interesting. Okay.
So it could be that the recent gains, they're just temporary.
Yeah, it might not last. Okay, so the information that you sent over, it didn't explicitly mention RSI, but it did highlight its importance. And for people like me who, aren't experts in technical analysis, why would we pay attention to RSI or the relative strength index?
Well, the thing about the relative strength index, it's a momentum indicator.
Right.
So it helps you to figure out if a stock might be overbought or oversold. Think of it like a rubber band. If you stretch a rubber band too far one way, it's going to snap back. And it's the same sort of thing with stocks. If if the RSI is above 70, then the stock price might have gone up too quickly.
Good.
And it's probably due for a price decrease.
Makes sense.
And then, if it goes below 30, then it could mean the opposite, that it's gone down too much. And so it might be due for a little bit of rebound.
Okay. So, with all these mixed signals and the volatility that we've seen, it sounds like the general recommendation would be to just hold any shares you might have at the moment.
Well, yeah, that's the cautious approach, Just given the uncertainty, it's probably wise to just wait and see what happens before, making any big decisions.
Okay. Now, there was also something in the analysis about a couple specific price levels, $2.30 and $2.50. And these were called resistance levels. So why are those numbers so significant?
Well, those are points where the stock has had, like, historically, a hard time breaking above. Like, imagine it's like a ceiling. If it keeps hitting that ceiling, it can't get past it. But if the price consistently trades above those levels, it might mean that that the buyers, they're getting stronger, and so the stock might have more room to go up. So some investors see that, breaking through that resistance level is a really good sign.
Okay, interesting. So let's move on to, what's maybe causing this activity. It sounds like there have been some recent developments and news with DatChat itself.
Yeah, definitely. A few things have happened recently that seem to be affecting the stock price. And one of the main ones is the registered direct offering back in January of this year. What that means is they sold 1,200,000 shares at $4.25 each. So that they raised approximately $5.1 million.
Wow. So that gives them a lot more money to, to do things with?
Now, that's usually what they do. They use that to pay for daily operations and to, look for more opportunities to grow.
Okay. What other news has been coming out about DatChat?
Another thing, a U.S. patent for their blockchain-based communication systems. They got a patent,
Interesting.
which is specifically tied to this platform they're going to launch in the first quarter of next year called Myzeum. It's supposed to be like this secure social media environment, where users have control over their digital content and stuff like that. What's really cool about this, I think, is that it really shows they're focused on data privacy, which
Cool.
is, a big concern for a lot of people these days.
It is.
So if this Myzeum platform can use this technology in a good way, it could really attract users who are looking for, more control over their data.
So that's a really good sign for them, potentially, that they're focusing on things that people actually want.
Definitely.
Okay. So a patent for blockchain and communication, that sounds like it could give them a big advantage.
It could. It really shows that they're in a unique position because they're combining, blockchain technology with cybersecurity. And the thing is, they're focusing on giving users the ability to manage the rights to their messages even after they're sent. So like in a world where privacy breaches are, becoming more and more common, that's a really appealing feature.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've talked about the stock price and the news, but what about the company itself? What does DatChat do?
Well, DatChat is a technology company,
Mm.
and they really focus on secure messaging and metaverse technologies and social media platforms. Um, their main thing is they want to give users privacy and control over their information, especially after they've already shared it.
Okay, so they're like really focused on the security side of things. And their app, they have an app called DatChat Messenger, and that app has it has some specific features, right, that kind of go along with, that idea of being secure.
Yeah. They have messages that automatically disappear after a certain time.
Mhm.
And they also have technology that prevents people from taking screenshots.
Yeah.
So that just gives users, more control over, what they share and who can see it. And they even have like encrypted storage for photos.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting.
So if we're looking at their financials, it sounds like they're really innovative, and they're working in a growing sector, but maybe not so profitable right now.
That's one way to put it. They're not making a ton of money at the moment.
Right.
Their revenue, the trailing 12 months, was only about $515,000.
Oh.
Yeah. And then they had a net loss of $4.75 million for that same period.
Yeah.
And then their earnings per share were negative.
Yeah.
So like negative $1.13.
Not great.
So, it raises the question of when they're going to become profitable.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. But there is something good about their debt situation, right?
There is. Despite, the losses, they do have a relatively low debt-to-equity ratio at 0.55.
Oh.
And a good thing they don't have any long-term debt,
Oh, okay.
which actually, could be a strength, especially for a company that's still growing.
Hmm.
Because they don't have this big, long-term debt hanging over their head.
Right. Less risk, yeah. Okay, so just to kind of summarize what we've talked about so far, we have some, potential warning signs, right? Like the losses and the volatility of the stock. But then we have some strengths. They're focused on privacy technology. They don't have any long-term debt.
Yeah.
So what's the general feeling out there about DatChat, from investors and people who are watching the market?
Yeah, I would say that market sentiment, it's mixed. Some analysts might look at it and say, well, the company's overvalued, based on its revenue. But there are people who are excited about these strategic moves that they're making,
Yeah.
you know, especially that patent and launching this new Mysium platform. And we can see that in the recent price increases. So it's kind of like people are weighing, the potential of the technology against what they're actually doing financially.
Right. So it's a bit of a gamble. It's kind of a wait and see. Okay. So who are DatChat's main competitors? Who else is doing, this kind of work?
Well, there's some big names in secure messaging,
Mm.
Signal, Telegram, Threema. They're all known for, encryption and privacy features.
So how does DatChat set itself apart from those companies?
Their advantage seems to be, the specific way they do encryption,
Hmm.
and they have all these unique user privacy features,
Yeah.
and particularly that ability to control message rights after they've sent them. And then, adding blockchain to this Mysium platform is another thing that could set them apart, especially for users who, they really want to own their data.
Okay, that makes sense. So looking ahead, what are some things that could really impact DatChat's future? Positively or negatively?
I mean, if they can successfully launch their new products, especially Mysium, and if they can form any strategic partnerships, that would be huge.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they also face risks. Privacy regulations could change. There's a lot of competition in both secure messaging and social media.
Right.
So, it really comes down to whether or not people are going to use this new platform.
Okay, so taking all that into consideration, everything that we've talked about, what's the takeaway here? What would you tell someone who's thinking about, maybe investing in DatChat?
Right now, I would say just hold. I mean, they have this really interesting technology, and it's a growing market. You can see that with their patent, and they're about to launch this new platform, but they're losing money. And the stock price is really volatile. It's not for the risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
So investors really need to, keep an eye on how they're doing financially and watch to see if people are actually using this new Mysium platform.
Okay, so considering all of this information that we've looked at today, we see a company that's got really interesting technology in a growing space, and we've got some evidence of that, right? The patent and the platform launch. But we also see that they're not making money yet, and the stock is, pretty volatile. It's up and down, up and down. So
Yeah. And the technical signals, those aren't super clear either. So that also just means, we need to be careful. We need to observe and see what happens. It seems like the market is trying to figure out, are these innovations going to be enough, to balance out the fact that they're not making money?
yeah, that's really interesting to me, because you have the patent, you have this potential, but then they're also not making money. So it's really like a push and pull, I guess.
For sure. I mean, translating innovation into profit, that's the challenge for a lot of companies.
Absolutely, it is. Okay, well, thank you so much for bringing all this information to our attention. I hope this has been helpful for our listeners, to kind of break down this company and what they're doing and what their future might look like.
Yeah. Hopefully, this will help you to make good decisions.
And don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment with your thoughts and any other topics you'd like us to explore in the future. Thanks for listening.